Victor Kane wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting through the viewport of outpost Kepler at the approaching vessel. In 15 years of maintaining this godforsaken refueling station on the edge of nowhere, he'd seen every class of ship in the known galaxy. This one was different. The craft moved with an almost organic grace, its hull rippling like liquid mercury under the harsh light of the binary stars. Beautiful, yes, but beauty didn't explain why it was limping toward his dock with power fluctuations that made his sensors scream warnings. Another rich alien with more money than sense, Victor muttered, pulling on his work jacket. At 42, he'd earned every gray hair in his beard and every line around his dark eyes. The frontier was hard on everyone, but especially on humans, who chose isolation over the crowded inner worlds. The ship's docking sequence was flawless despite its obvious distress, settling into Bay 3 with barely a whisper. Victor grabbed his toolkit, an ancient collection of human-made tools that had saved more advanced ships than their creators ever intended, and headed for the bay. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and Victor's breath caught. She emerged like something from a fever dream, tall and graceful with skin that seemed to shimmer between pale blue and silver. Her features were delicate yet alien, high cheekbones, large eyes that held depths like nebulae, and flowing hair that moved as if underwater. She wore form-fitting attire that looked both regal and practical, marking her as nobility from one of the core species. "I require assistance," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones. "My vessel has suffered a cascade failure in its primary systems," Victor found his voice. "Victor Kane, Station Chief, and you are?" "Senna Vex of the Lysarian Collective." She inclined her head formally. "I was told humans possess unconventional solutions to technical problems." There was something in her tone, not quite condescension, but surprise. As if she couldn't believe she was asking a human for help. Victor moved to her ship's access panel, running his scanner over the elegant curves. The readings made him whistle low. "Lady, your ship's having an identity crisis. Every system's talking to every other system, but none of them agree on what language to use." Senna moved closer, close enough that he caught her scent, something like starflowers and ozone. "Our finest engineers spent 3 cycles attempting repairs. The ship's AI became increasingly erratic before falling silent entirely." "That's your problem right there." Victor popped open an access hatch and peered inside. "You've got 17 different safety protocols all trying to be the boss. Sometimes the simplest solution." He pulled out a small device that looked primitive compared to her ship's sleek technology. A basic circuit bypass he'd jury-rigged years ago. With practiced movements, he spliced it into her ship's main power flow. The vessel hummed to life, its hull brightening as systems came online in perfect harmony. Senna stared, her large eyes wide. "How did you—" "Our master technician said it would require complete reconstruction of the neural matrices." Victor shrugged, uncomfortable with her intense gaze. "Sometimes you don't need to think harder, just different. Your ship's too smart for its own good. Needed someone dumb enough to treat it simple." She stepped closer, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. This close, he could see flecks of gold in her alien eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Something electric seemed to pass between them. "You underestimate yourself, Victor Kane." Her voice had dropped to something almost intimate. "What you accomplished in minutes, our greatest minds could not achieve in cycles. There is wisdom in your simplicity." Heat crept up Victor's neck. He'd been alone on this station too long. If an alien, however beautiful, could affect him like this. "Just doing my job. Standard rates apply, though I figure someone like you won't miss the credits." Senna's expression grew thoughtful, almost calculating. "Credits seem insufficient for such service. My people have other traditions for expressing gratitude." She moved to her ship's cargo bay, returning with an ornate case that seemed to glow with inner light. Inside, nestled in material that looked like crystallized starlight, lay an object that defied easy description. It was roughly the size of Victor's palm, multifaceted like a gem but clearly technological, pulsing with soft patterns of color. Among my people Life debts are not taken lightly, Senna said formally. You have restored not just my ship, but likely my life. This is a gratitude bond, a sacred artifact of my house. Victor stared at the beautiful object, something deep in his gut warning him this was more significant than she was letting on. Look, lady, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't need, please. Her voice carried an almost vulnerable note. To refuse would dishonor both of us. It is merely a token, a symbol of thanks between our peoples. Against his better judgment, Victor found himself reaching for the artifact. The moment his skin touched its surface, the world exploded into sensation, light, sound, and something deeper flooding through him as the bond activated and their fates became forever intertwined. Victor's world tilted as energy coursed through him, the crystalline artifact pulsing with increasing intensity. The sensation wasn't painful, more like being struck by lightning, made of pure emotion. Colors he'd never seen before painted themselves across his vision while alien thoughts brushed against his mind like whispered secrets. What the hell? He gasped, trying to release the artifact, but his hand wouldn't obey. The device had become warm, almost alive, and seemed fused to his. Senna's eyes widened in what looked like genuine surprise mixed with something else. Satisfaction? The bond accepts you, she breathed. I had hoped, but with humans one can never be certain. The artifact's glow intensified, and suddenly Victor could feel her, not just her physical presence, but something deeper. Her emotions flickered, at the edge of his consciousness, relief, anticipation, and beneath it all, a loneliness that matched his own. What did you do to me? Victor's voice came out rougher than intended. The artifact finally released his hand, but he could still feel its influence spreading through his system like warm honey. Senna approached him slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. I have honored you with a life bond, Victor Kane. Among my people, it is the highest form of gratitude, a sacred connection between souls. Connection? Victor backed away, his mind reeling. Lady, I fixed your ship. I didn't sign up for some alien voodoo. It is not voodoo, Senna said, though her tone held amusement rather than offense. The bond is ancient, predating our spacefaring civilization. It links two beings who have saved each other's lives, creating, she paused, searching for words, a partnership of mutual protection and support. Victor felt something shift in his perception. Suddenly he could sense her location even with his eyes closed, could feel the steady rhythm of her dual hearts beating. This is insane. I can feel you in my head. As I can feel you. Senna's voice had grown softer, almost intimate. Your loneliness, Victor, your strength, the walls you've built around your heart. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the complex patterns of silver in her skin. You've been alone too long. Heat flooded Victor's cheeks. Having his emotions laid bare to this alien woman felt more invasive than any physical examination. That's my business. Not anymore. Senna reached out, her fingers hovering inches from his face. The bond makes us partners, Victor. Under galactic law, you are now my designated protector, and I am bound to your well-being. What affects one, affects both. Galactic law? Victor's voice cracked. I didn't agree to any law. I live out here specifically to avoid legal entanglements. Senna's expression grew troubled. I may not have fully explained the implications before the bonding. In my excitement to honor a worthy candidate, I perhaps acted hastily. Hastily? Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've legally bound me to you without my consent, created some kind of psychic link between us, and you call it hasty? The bond cannot be forced, Senna said quietly. It only activates if both parties are compatible on a fundamental level. Your acceptance proves we are suited for each other. Victor felt that flutter of awareness again, her emotions bleeding through the connection. Beneath her composed exterior, she was nervous, almost afraid. But there was something else, something warmer that made his pulse quicken. "What happens now?" he asked, his anger fading into resignation. "Now we learn to navigate this new reality." Senna moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. "I must return to Lysarian space soon. There are political matters that require my attention. The bond means you'll need to accompany me." "Absolutely not." Victor's response was immediate. "I'm not leaving my station to play bodyguard to alien royalty." Senna turned back to him, her alien features showing genuine surprise. "You would refuse? The bond makes such separation difficult, painful even." As if summoned by her words, Victor felt a sharp pang in his chest, not physical pain, but something deeper. The thought of her leaving created an ache he couldn't explain. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. But even as he spoke, he found himself memorizing the way starlight played across her silver skin, the graceful curve of her neck, the way her eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies. "Perhaps," Senna said softly, "but it is our reality now. The bond has judged us compatible, Victor Kane. In time, you may find it less burden than blessing." She moved closer again, and this time Victor didn't back away. Her alien beauty was undeniable, but it was the loneliness he sensed in her, a perfect mirror to his own, that kept his feet planted. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked. Senna's composure flickered for just a moment. "The bond, it deepens over time. What you feel now is merely the beginning. As we grow closer, as our minds become more intertwined." She paused, her cheeks taking on a deeper blue tint. "Lysarian bonds are not merely protective partnerships." Understanding hit Victor, like a meteor strike. "You're talking about marriage." "Not precisely, but—" Senna's voice grew quiet. "Among my people, bonded pairs often become mates. The connection draws compatible souls together in ways that transcend species barriers." Victor stared at her, his mind spinning. In the space of an hour, he'd gone from lonely mechanic to alien bonded protector to potential mate of a being from another world. The smart thing would be to demand she reverse the process, to send her away and return to his simple, isolated life. Instead, he found himself asking, "How long before your ship is ready to travel?" 3 standard days for full system optimization," Senna replied, hope flickering in her alien eyes. Victor nodded slowly. "Then we have 3 days to figure this out." As if responding to his acceptance, the bond pulsed with warmth, and for the first time in years, Victor Kane didn't feel alone. Victor woke to dreams that weren't his own. He'd been soaring through crystalline spires beneath purple skies, his body moving with impossible grace through architecture that defied human understanding. The dream carried emotions: wonder, homesickness, and an underlying sadness that felt ancient and deep. "Senna," he whispered, sitting up in his narrow station bunk. The bond hummed with awareness, telling him she was close, probably in the guest quarters he'd hastily prepared for her. 2 days had passed since the bonding, and each night brought more vivid shared experiences. Her dreams, her memories, glimpses of a life among the stars that made his frontier existence seem impossibly small. A soft chime from his comm unit interrupted his thoughts. "Victor?" Senna's voice carried both concern and embarrassment. "I apologize for disturbing your rest. The dreams, they are stronger tonight." Victor found himself pulling on clothes without conscious decision, the bond drawing him toward her like gravity. "Yeah, I felt them too. Give me a minute." He padded through the station's corridors to her quarters, the familiar metal walls suddenly feeling crude compared to the organic beauty of Lysarian architecture he'd witnessed in her dreams. The door slid open before he could knock. Senna stood, framed in the doorway, and Victor's breath caught. She wore something that looked like liquid starlight, a sleeping garment that clung to her tall, elegant form and seemed to shimmer with her movements. Her alien beauty struck him anew. The graceful curve of her neck, the way her silver-blue skin seemed to glow in the dim lighting. "I couldn't sleep either," she said softly. "The bond grows stronger. Your emotions, your memories, They call. To me? Victor stepped inside, noting how she'd rearranged the sparse quarters. Plants that looked like crystalline flowers now graced every surface. Filling the air with that starflower scent he was beginning to associate with her. What did you see? Your childhood on Earth. The garage where you learned to work with your hands. The day you decided to leave it all behind for the frontier. Senna moved closer, her large eyes reflecting depths he was only beginning to understand. Such pain, Victor. What drove you so far from your own kind? The question hit deeper than it should have. Through the bond, Victor could feel her genuine concern, her desire to understand rather than judge. Sometimes running away is the only choice left. And sometimes, Senna said, reaching out to touch his arm, running leads us exactly where we need to be. Her touch sent electricity through him, the bond amplifying every sensation. He could feel her pulse, quick and alien, could sense the warmth radiating from her skin. More than that, he could feel her growing attraction to him, a mirror of his own confused desires. This is complicated, Victor said, his voice rougher than intended. Most worthwhile things are. Senna's fingers traced along his arm, and he could feel her curiosity mixing with desire. Among my people, physical compatibility is considered as important as emotional resonance. The bond ensures both. Victor swallowed hard. And you want to test that theory? Instead of answering directly, Senna stepped closer until they were almost touching. I have lived centuries, Victor Kane, bound by duty and expectation. I have never felt what I feel when our minds touch, when your strength flows through the bond. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Show me what it means to choose for oneself. Victor's resistance crumbled. He cupped her face in his, hands marveling at the silken texture of her alien skin, the way she leaned into his touch with something like relief. When their lips met, the bond exploded with sensation. The kiss was unlike anything Victor had ever experienced. Through the connection, he could feel what she felt. The electric touch of his hands, the way her dual hearts raced, the desire that flowed between them like a tide. Her skin grew warmer under his touch, taking on a deeper blue tint that somehow made her even more beautiful. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Senna's eyes held a wonder that matched his own. The bond, she whispered. I never imagined it could be so intense. Victor traced the line of her jaw, still amazed by the reality of her. Is this normal for your people? Nothing about this is normal, Senna admitted, her hands finding the edges of his shirt. Bonds usually form between Lysarians, between those of similar biology and culture. A human and Lysarian bonding is... She paused, searching for words. Unprecedented. Good or bad, unprecedented? Victor asked, though her emotions through the bond already gave him the answer. Revolutionary, Senna breathed, and kissed him again. This time there was no hesitation, no holding back. The bond made every touch a double sensation, every caress shared between them. Victor had never imagined such intimacy was possible, not just physical but emotional and mental as well. Through the connection, he could feel Senna's wonder, her joy, her complete surrender to the moment. They moved together, with increasing urgency, the bond guiding them past the awkwardness of different biologies toward perfect compatibility. Her alien beauty became familiar under his hands, and through their link Victor felt himself seen and accepted in ways he'd never imagined possible. Later, as they lay entwined in the afterglow, Senna traced patterns on Victor's chest. There is something you must know, she said quietly. My return to Lysarian space is not merely political. I am being recalled to face judgment. Victor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. Judgment for what? I am the last of my line, Victor. My family held significant power in the collective, but we opposed certain expansionist policies. My survival represents both opportunity and threat to various factions. Her voice grew heavy with old grief. The bond between us will be seen as either a powerful alliance or dangerous weakness, depending on who gains control. Are we walking into a trap? Senna was quiet for so long Victor thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said, "Perhaps, but the bond cannot be broken, and separation would destroy us both. We face whatever comes together." Victor held her closer, feeling the steady rhythm of her alien hearts against his chest. Outside, the binary stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the changes rippling through two lives bound by forces beyond their understanding. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, in the shared warmth of their connection, Victor Kane was no longer alone. Victor woke to alarms shrieking through the station and the taste of Senna's fear sharp in his mouth through their bond. He rolled from the bed where they'd spent the night exploring the depths of their connection, grabbing his clothes and the plasma pistol he kept for emergencies. "3 ships," Senna said, her voice tight with controlled panic as she slipped into her form-fitting attire. Military configuration, but not Lysarian. Through the bond, Victor felt her recognition and dread. "Friends of yours?" "The Hegemony Collective. They're competitors for influence in Lysarian space." Senna's skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality. "If they're here, it means someone leaked information about our bond." Victor's stomach dropped. "How bad is that?" "Catastrophic." Senna moved to the viewport, her alien grace made sharp by urgency. "A bonded human represents unprecedented access to Lysarian political structures. In the wrong hands, you could be weaponized against my entire species." The station shuddered as something large docked with excessive force. Victor's proximity sensors screamed warnings about hull breaches and atmospheric compromises. "Victor Kane," a voice boomed through the comm system, electronically distorted but unmistakably authoritative. "You will surrender yourself in the Lysarian Noble. Compliance ensures your survival." "Like hell," Victor muttered, checking his weapon's charge. Through the bond, he felt Senna's surge of admiration and something deeper, pride in his defiance. "They'll kill us both once they have what they want," Senna said. "The hegemony doesn't leave loose ends." Victor's mind raced through the station's defensive systems, mostly automated cargo handling and basic security measures. Nothing designed for military assault. But he'd spent 15 years jury-rigging solutions to impossible problems. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Minutes at most." "Their boarding equipment is—" The lights went out, emergency power casting everything in hellish red. Victor felt rather than saw Senna move to his side, their bond allowing perfect coordination even in darkness. "This way," Victor whispered, leading her through corridors he knew by touch. "Maintenance level. If we can reach the power core." They moved through the station's mechanical heart, past humming life support systems and recycling units. Victor's hands found the manual overrides he'd installed years ago, backup systems the original designers never intended. "What are you doing?" Senna asked as Victor began rerouting power conduits. "Something stupid," Victor admitted. "Your ship? How fast can it launch?" 30 seconds from power up, but then we've got one chance." Victor's fingers flew over the manual controls, bypassing safeties and redirecting the station's entire power grid. "When I give the word, run for your ship, don't look back." Through the bond, Victor felt Senna's protest before she voiced it. "I won't leave you." "The bond says you protect me, not die with me." Victor found her in the darkness, cupping her face in his hands. "If they get both of us, your people lose everything. At least this way." "No." Senna's voice carried absolute authority. "The bond works both ways, Victor Kane. You are my protector, but I am your partner. We face this together." Before Victor could argue, the maintenance hatch exploded inward. Armored figures poured through the breach, their weapons painting targeting lasers across the mechanical space. "Found them," one called out. "The human and the—" Victor triggered his improvised overload. Every system on the station screamed as massive power surges coursed through the grid. Emergency lighting exploded in showers of sparks, life support cycling into overdrive, and most importantly, the artificial gravity fluctuating wildly. In the chaos of floating debris and disoriented attackers, Victor and Senna moved as one. The bond let them coordinate perfectly. her alien agility complementing his knowledge of the station's layout. They fought their way through corridors that had become three-dimensional battlefields, Victor's desperate engineering buying them precious seconds. The docking bay, Senna gasped as they reached her ship. Behind them, their pursuers were adapting to the artificial gravity fluctuations, moving with military precision despite the chaos. Senna's ship responded to her presence, systems coming online with liquid grace. But as they reached the airlock, Victor felt a sharp pain in his shoulder spinning him around. A hegemony soldier had found an angle, his energy weapon putting Victor down hard. "Victor!" Senna's scream carried both human anguish and something else, a harmonic that made the station's metal walls ring like a bell. Through the bond, Victor felt her rage building, felt powers he'd never suspected flowing through their connection. Senna raised her hands and the very air around them began to sing. The attacking soldiers stopped mid-charge, their weapons clattering to the deck as they clutched their heads. Whatever Senna was doing, it was affecting them on a level beyond physical pain. "Psychic resonance," she said, her voice carrying multiple tones. "A gift of my bloodline that I'd hoped never to use." She helped Victor to his feet, her touch flooding him with healing energy through their bond. The wound in his shoulder sealed itself, leaving only torn fabric as evidence. "We need to go," Victor said, though he found himself staring at this new side of his bonded partner. Before they recover. They made it to her ship's bridge as the station's power grid finally stabilized. Through the viewports, Victor could see the hegemony vessels moving to intercept, their weapons charging. "Can we outrun them?" Victor asked. Senna's hands moved over controls that looked like art more than technology. "In open space, perhaps, but they'll call for reinforcements. The hegemony has resources throughout this sector." Victor looked back at Outpost Kepler, his home for 15 years, now damaged and invaded. Through the bond, he felt Senna's sorrow for his loss. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This is my fault. If I hadn't involved you—" "Hey." Victor took her hand, feeling the familiar electric tingle of their connection. "I made my choice. Both of them, fixing your ship and accepting your bond." Senna squeezed his fingers, her alien eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then we make the next choice together. My people have laws, traditions, ways of resolving disputes like this. If we can reach Lysarian space, then that's where we go." Victor settled into the co-pilot seat, the ship's systems somehow adapting to accommodate his human physiology. Together, as Senna's ship leaped into hyperspace, leaving the wreckage of Victor's old life behind, he felt the bond pulse with new determination. Whatever waited for them in alien space, they would face it as partners. The real test of their connection was just beginning. The Lysarian homeworld hung before them like a living jewel, its crystalline cities catching the light of 3 suns and scattering it into rainbow cascades. Victor had seen it through Senna's memories, but the reality overwhelmed him. A planet-sized work of art that made every human achievement seem crude by comparison. "The conclave awaits," Senna said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Through their bond, Victor felt her complex mixture of homecoming joy and deep apprehension. 2 weeks of travel had only strengthened their connection, making the prospect of separation unthinkable. "Remind me again why they get to decide our fate?" Victor asked, adjusting the formal attire Senna had fabricated for him. Something that looked vaguely human but incorporated Lysarian design elements that marked him as bonded. "Because the bond between us creates legal implications that ripple through the entire collective." Senna's hands moved nervously over her ship's controls as they descended toward the capital spire. "My bloodline carries hereditary obligations. Your status as my bonded partner grants you access to state secrets, trade information, military intelligence. Some see this as opportunity. Others see it as catastrophic security breach." Victor reached over and took her hand, feeling the familiar, electric tingle of their connection. "And what do you see it as?" "Love," Senna said simply, her alien eyes meeting his. I see it as the first real choice I've made in 3 centuries of existence. The landing platform they approached looked like it had been grown rather than built, organic curves rising from the planet's surface in impossible spirals. As their ship settled into the designated space, Victor could see the welcoming committee. Dozens of Lysarians in formal attire, their silver-blue skin gleaming in the tri-solar light. The one in the center is High Arbiter Kess, Senna explained, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She's been my family's greatest opponent in the collective. The bond gives her ammunition against me. Victor studied the tall, regal figure waiting for them. Even from a distance, she radiated authority and barely contained hostility. What's her angle? She believes my bloodline has grown too influential, too independent. A human bond, especially one formed without collective approval, proves her point about our family's disregard for tradition. Senna's grip on his hand tightened. She'll argue for immediate dissolution of the bond and your removal from Lysarian space. Permanently? Victor asked, though he already knew the answer from the grief flowing through their connection. The hegemony made it clear that you're too valuable to leave alive and uncontrolled. If the conclave dissolves our bond. Senna couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Victor felt her certainty that they would both die, him from assassination, her from the psychic trauma of forced separation. They disembarked onto the platform, and immediately Victor felt the weight of alien attention. Dozens of Lysarian nobles studied him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Their combined psychic presence pressed against his mind like a physical force. Senna Vex. High Arbiter Kess's voice carried harmonics that made Victor's bones vibrate. You return to face judgment for actions that have endangered our entire species. I return to claim my rights under the ancient laws, Senna replied, her own voice taking on formal cadences Victor had never heard from her. The bond was freely given and freely accepted. It cannot be dissolved by external authority. Can it not? Kess stepped forward, her silver skin taking on darker tones that Victor was learning indicated strong emotion. You bonded with an alien, without collective approval, shared our most sacred rituals with an outsider, and created a security vulnerability that has already resulted in hegemony attacks. How do you answer these charges? Victor felt Senna's composure wavering through their bond. The formal accusations were striking at her deepest fears, that her choice had doomed her people. I answer, Victor said, stepping forward, that maybe your security was already compromised if the hegemony knew about our bond before you did. The platform fell silent. High Arbiter Kess turned the full force of her attention on Victor, her alien features sharp with surprise and anger. The human speaks out of turn, she said coldly. You have no voice in this proceeding. According to Lysarian law, he does. The new voice came from the crowd, and Victor saw an elderly Lysarian male moving forward. His skin held the deep blue tones of advanced age, and his presence carried an authority that made even Kess step back. High Scholar Den, Senna whispered through their bond. The collective's greatest legal mind. Explain yourself, Scholar, Kess demanded. The bonding ritual, when completed, grants full partnership status under our oldest codes, Den said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. If we dissolve bonds based on political convenience, we destroy the very foundation of our society. The human has equal voice in determining their fate. Victor felt a surge of hope through the bond, but also Senna's caution. What does that mean practically, he asked. It means, Scholar Den said with what might have been amusement, that you may choose to accept formal dissolution if both parties agree, or you may choose to defend your bond through ritual combat, or... He paused dramatically. You may choose to invoke the right of New Path. The crowd stirred, shocked murmurs rippling through the assembled nobles. Even Kess looked surprised. The right of New Path hasn't been invoked in over 2 millennia, she protested. Nevertheless, it remains valid law, Den replied. If the bonded pair can demonstrate that their union serves the greater good of the collective, they may request recognition of a new tradition. Victor looked at Senna, feeling her mixture of hope and fear. What would that mean for us? It would mean, Senna said slowly, that we could legitimize human-Lysarian bonding as a new form of alliance. Open the door for our peoples to form deeper connections. And if we fail, then we die together, as partners should. Victor thought about the life he'd left behind, the loneliness, the isolation, the endless cycle of maintaining machines for strangers who passed through his station. Then he thought about the past weeks with Senna, the depth of connection he'd never imagined possible, the way their bond had already made him more than he'd ever been alone. "Hi, Arbiter Kess," Victor said, his voice carrying across the silent platform. "We invoke the right of new path. Our bond doesn't weaken the collective, it shows a way to make it stronger." "This is madness," Kess protested, but Scholar Den was already nodding approvingly. "The right is invoked," he announced. "The bonded pair will have one cycle to demonstrate the value of their union. If they succeed, their bond will be recognized and registered as the foundation of new law. If they fail..." "We understand the stakes," Senna said, her hand finding Victor's. Through their connection, he felt her gratitude, her love, and her absolute determination to succeed. As they were escorted from the platform toward whatever trials awaited them, Victor reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. He'd fixed a broken ship and accepted a simple gift of gratitude. That choice had cost him his old life, his safety, and his certainty about the future. But it had given him something infinitely more valuable, a partner who completed him in ways he was still discovering, a connection that transcended species and tradition, and a chance to help write the next chapter of galactic history. Looking at Senna, her alien beauty radiant with hope and determination, Victor Kane knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bonded partners in love and law, proving that sometimes the best solutions came not from following tradition, but from daring to create something entirely new. The bond pulsed between them, warm and strong and full of infinite possibility.